Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, yet again, regardless of what time of the day, what day of the week you so happen to be watching this live stream right now, or maybe you're watching back later on. It's time for the Americans for Tennessee, Americans for Prosperity, Tennessee weekly update. You can tell, James, already, it's a long week, man. We're getting to the end of the long week. We're getting to the end of a long session. I'm a little bit worn out
Slow
myself
clap
already.
for Grant on the best intro to a Facebook Live video ever. That was so good. Love you so much.
We're doing it, man. We're doing it big right now, James, right? I mean, it's been a haul. It's been a grind this week in particular. Everybody knows James. Everybody knows David Thompson. Let me tell you a little bit about what this week is and what we're going to go over here in just a second. And then I'm going to introduce James. Let's see how Bear's doing, his new son, see how James is doing. Y'all may not know this about me, but before I came to Americans for Prosperity, I was a children's pastor back in the day. And so I have a heart for the family unit. I have a heart for seeing how you can raise a child and seeing what that does to our society. I also found out during law school, primarily through, say, our crim law courses, or maybe even our constitutional law courses or con crim courses, or whatever you want to say, what it does to the structure of that family unit when you remove, say, the father for a generation. It's a weird way to introduce this, James, but this week was Victim Rights Week. Okay. And there and most of this show today, at least for the state portion of our legislation, is going to be taken up by dealing with issues of criminal justice reform. And I wanted to start that way, James, just by saying, like, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. It hits me at my core. It's part of the reason why I came to work for AFP, to extend this passion to really see dynamic structural change, to fix those generational problems, man. Right? To get at the core of what AFP is really trying to do by being smart on crime, soft on taxpayer, right? By solving those generational concerns. And I know I'm a little bit overselling it here at the beginning here, James, but anyways, buddy, Victims' Rights Week, stuff coming up. How are you doing, James? Man, how's the kid? And what do you think about this past week, the legislature, anything like that?
Well, sure. Grant, yes, I can empathize with you. It has been a long week. In fact, session went on a little bit longer on Thursday than I had anticipated. There was a lot of debate on the floor, and it did center around criminal justice reform bills that were coming through, especially the governor's administrative bills. And we'll get into a deeper conversation around that. But those did pass. But it has been a long week. You talk about your fondness for children. I can certainly appreciate that. I'm just wondering when you and Gabi are going to take that next step.
You and everyone else.
Boom!
We're working on that, James.
Look, I can't be the only one that keeps having kids.
That's right, man.
You guys got to step up.
We can always babysit, man. That's the way you should look at this, right?
Oh, for sure. I had a couple more offers yesterday evening. Met with some old time friends that found out about the new baby, and they were all eager to offer their babysitting services. We'll see how many of them are actually willing to follow through on that. We'll see.
Hey, so you know what the show's going to be about here today. We're going to start with some state stuff, then we're going to go into here in just a little bit the court packing bizarre scenario that's going on right now, moving it from 9 Supreme Court justices to 13 Supreme Court justices. This is not the first time this has been tried in American history. I doubt it'll be the last time this has been tried in American history. But this is not just Victim Rights Week. This is also the week where we had a major court ruling. I'm not going to hide this ball from anybody. And Tennessee responded in a way that I have to be honest with you, I don't think anybody is talking about. And I think it needs to be the core issue that everyone is discussing right now is the way that Tennessee in particular responded to some of the stuff that happened over the summer. And of course, I'm obviously talking about the George Floyd ruling that came down here. And James, let me just introduce real quickly here before we get to talking about House Bill 1406. And before I tell you what that is, I'll let Representative Michael Curcio, the bill's sponsor, explain to everyone where this idea came about, what ended up happening. And the audio's a little bit low, I apologize, but put your listening ears on. Here's Representative Michael Curcio explaining House Bill 1406.
So members, this bill as amended comes from some work done over the summer to analyze and improve law enforcement's use of force policies. On July 2nd, 2020, Governor Bill Lee announced a partnership with the Tennessee Association of Police, TACP, the Tennessee Sheriff's Association, the TSA, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security, the Tennessee Highway Patrol, the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, and the Tennessee Peace Officers Standard and Training Commission to enhance policies, improve information sharing, and increase officer training. This partnership resulted in the Governor's Use of Force Policy Committee, which issued recommendations on September the 10th, 2020, in the form of a sample use of force policy for law enforcement agencies to adopt across the state. This bill, as amended, seeks to codify these best practices to ensure that the men and women of law enforcement continue to excel in their role of keeping Tennesseans safe. And I want to say that in Tennessee, we lead. We have a history of leading. I want us to continue to lead.
That part right there, James. Okay. I'm just going to continually tease this out for another 5 to 10 minutes here. And I know the audience is going to hate me doing that, but I need to set that
You do such a wonderful job.
I know I do. It's like, that's how you reel them in, James, right? I'm going to continue to tease out what this bill actually does and let everyone know that in my personal assessment, this is clearly responding to several events that happened over the summer, but it must be said to set the stage. This is essentially Governor Lee forming a task force with virtually every version of law enforcement in the state to come up with a best practices use of force policy. That's the standard here. Before we go into telling what that bill does, James, anything we're missing here, background, anything else we need to set up before I really dive into what this bill looks like?
No, I think you're touching on it already. This is an effort that is pretty comprehensive, includes as many law enforcement agencies at every level to make sure that there is really a strong buy-in from law enforcement.
All right. So with that being said here, let's go directly into what this bill actually does. And I kind of want to start here, if I could, if y'all would indulge me for just a minute. I'm just going to go reading a little bit of line by line what the bill does, just to give a quick breakdown. And then we're going to dive right into this. Check this out. This is House Bill 1406, Senate Bill 1380. Just some of the things this bill intends to touch on. Again, keep in mind, this is a Republican leading this in the House, Representative Curcio. A strong R Republican, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Mike Bell, leading this in the Senate. This is going to sound like a lot of Democrat policy with the backing of law enforcement. You understand what I'm saying here. This is the true convergence of the way that Tennessee leads. You heard Representative Michael Curcio just say this. Tennessee leads. I believe him when he says this. This is Republicans, Democrats reaching across the aisle to work together with law enforcement. Listen to what this bill does. Chokeholds. Gets rid of chokeholds unless you're talking about a situation where use of life or use of force is necessary to prevent death type of situation. Okay. No more chokeholds being used. You also have to have some type of de-escalation training, verbal de-escalation, application of reasonable and proportional use of force, de-escalation in circumstances of decreased resistance, allowing a suspect time to submit to arrest before force is used, a duty to intervene. James, tell me if I'm wrong. This phraseology right here, a duty to intervene, was the leading call over the summer. If a law enforcement sees another member of law enforcement using excessive force, you have a duty to intervene. I'm telling y'all, this is right here in front of us, and it's put there by a Republican, backed by Democrats, pushed by law enforcement. There's also a duty to report if you have excessive force that's been used here. It places circumstances around shooting into moving vehicles. And the last piece here, man, right here, a magistrate shall not issue no-knock search warrants. Gets rid of no-knock search warrants as well. And I'm telling you, James, just first reactions here, this sounds like legislation that might come, say, from a Democrat nationwide campaign push. Yet now we know this was not only backed by law enforcement across the board says, we're already practicing this way anyways. These are already our operating principles, and it's ran by Republicans in the House. I don't know why this story isn't being told more across the state. What do you think, James?
Well, obviously, there's a national narrative that's being broadcast out there, and that's certainly what has stolen the wind from the sails of this good legislation. You make a good point. A lot of these things are already in practice, so this basically codifies what Tennessee is doing. But more importantly, this is a demonstration of Tennessee's leadership. Whereas a lot of these same conversations are being held at the national level, we have still yet to see the federal Congress, the U.S. Congress, take action on these same items. So it's important to have this conversation in as many venues as possible, So I'm glad that we're talking about it, and I'm hoping that this conversation can continue, especially when the lawmakers end session and return back to their districts. They really need to promote this bill.
Yeah, let me just end here then as we move on to some other legislation. Here's a quick clip that's about to go into Representative Griffey giving his take on this, and then one of the leading Democrats in the entire House of Tennessee giving his take on this as well. Let's listen to this as we wrap up this bill.
Thank you for that, Representative Griffey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sponsor, for bringing it. And Leader Lambert for the confirmation. I think law enforcement indicated they don't have any problems or concerns with the legislation as it's drafted. And based upon that, I'll be supporting your legislation. So thank you.
All right, and before we get to the next one here, James, tell me if I'm wrong. Is it too much to say that Representative Griffey is one of the bigger, if not the largest Trump supporter in the building? Do you know what I'm saying? Like you walk into the guy's office and there's Trump stuff literally from floor to ceiling. You know what I mean?
That is an understatement, and I appreciate his enthusiasm for a former president. There's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that he even recognizes that this is a good bill, and certainly he has brought up amendments to other good legislation that demonstrates his fondness for a tougher hand. So the fact that he is supportive of this legislation is a great sign, to be honest with you.
Let's end then with one of the leading Democrats in the House. Here's their take.
Representative Hardaway.
Representative Hardaway, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the sponsor. This bill is pretty much my Christmas wish list. And that's, and that sandwich.
I don't understand that reference, by the way. They said something about "and that sandwich." If somebody realizes what they're talking about, fill me in. Let's go.
I think in the climate that we're in, this bill will go a long ways towards reestablishing the trust factor.
And that's what it is. That's where I wanted to end. And I know I'm sounding a little bit like a broken record here, James, and maybe I'm overselling this a little bit, but I genuinely believe that this is one of the better stories that's not being told across the nation. All right. Legislation carried by Republicans that has Democrat backing, that was supported by law enforcement, properly enacting what law enforcement should be, recognizing and respecting the dignity in another human being, recognizing and respecting the constitutionality behind how and why law enforcement operates in our society. You just heard there a Democrat saying this is potentially my wish list, and ending it all with saying exactly what I'm talking about, James, of this type of bill will reinstill trust in law enforcement. We've had so much loss of trust in these government institutions over the last couple of years. And I'm not talking just law enforcement, man. I'm talking a slew of other things. All right. You all know what I'm implying here. Anything we could do to push some trust back in these institutions and to have a genuine bipartisan push for great legislation like this, that has to count as a win. Last thing I'll say about it, James, anything you want to cap on there?
No, Grant, I think you pretty much hit on every aspect of why this is such a good bill. But it sounds like Shine might want to chime in.
Yeah, I want to throw just one thing in there that I think should be magnified because stuff like this is almost unheard of in our climate of intense tribalism, where people get into camps not because of principle, right? People have ideas, and I say people very broadly, and because I feel like it's covering a lot of the culture here. There's a lot of people who decide what's important, decide what to work on, decide what is valuable or not valuable based on this tribalism. And this is a really good example of people coming together around principle, about stuff they think is important that has nothing to do with tribe. In fact, I would even say the main reason this is a big deal is because of the climate we're in with this tribalism, and the big deal is who's working on it. People from different tribes, at least commercially, retail, whatever, different tribes, even though, those are all state legislators. They're all they all know each other and stuff, and it's not as tribal as it would be if CNN and Fox News and weird stuff like that. But I'd say this goes counter to the culture, generally speaking, in a very positive way. And man, how often can you say about a state legislature that they're counterculture? That doesn't happen very often. So good on them. Congratulations. And thanks for state legislature, Tennessee. Thanks for being a good example to all of us about being focused on principle and not tribe, you know?
Absolutely, especially in a time
I'm
like
really,
this.
I'm really hoping that David's audio is in full working order. I really hope everybody was able to hear that.
Yeah, that was good. That was a
And
good
that's a
spiel.
legitimate concern.
The
It happens,
by
but
the-
I'm pretty sure it's working. I'm pretty sure everything's
Okay,
working
good.
fine, but yeah.
By the way, update on where this bill is. So it passed the Senate, full floor Senate vote, 32-0. Not a single no vote coming out against this thing. That's received wide bipartisan support across the board in both houses, in both chambers there. House Bill 1406 just passed out of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee on Tuesday or Wednesday, rather, of last week. I think everybody was on board with this. Just a quick note there, aside from Leader Lamberth, he had one small note about something dealing with the no-knock warrants. So he voted present, not voting, but nevertheless, wide support across the board. That bill, House Bill 1406, will be coming up in the House Criminal Justice Full Committee on the 26th, which is next week. There's a link in the show notes, by the way. Just click the Evernote link, scroll down to these notes here. You can contact those members of the Criminal Justice Full Committee, ask them to support this bill. Moving on to a few other state issues here, James. So that $350 bond, this is House Bill 59, Senate Bill 260, all right? Made it out of Senate Finance, Ways and Means. We finally got it into the subcommittee, Finance and Ways and Means for House Bill 59, removes the $350 bond for civil asset forfeiture cases, as we've said. I think we're all kind of up to speed with where this bill is, what it does. But a very interesting kind of wrinkle has developed over the last couple of weeks here that I just wanted to touch on and maybe poke at a little bit here. All right. First of all, I need to say one more time, when it comes to civil asset forfeiture, Americans for Prosperity is completely behind criminal forfeiture. If you commit a crime and are convicted of committing that crime, take all the property you want to, whatever, that's fine. If you've not been convicted of that crime, we personally believe there's a constitutional concern with seizing and forfeiting that property over to the state. Tennessee is one of only 3 states that requires this $350 bond, which you have to pay per item seized. So you have to pay for every single item seized, $350 per item seized, just to show up and have a chance to defend your property, even if you're not convicted of a crime. Now, here's the interesting wrinkle, all right? It was just revealed last week that obviously when a bill goes through Finance, Ways and Means, it's what's called placed behind the budget. And James, at some point here, stop me if you want to explain the technical jargon, but that kind of means placed behind the budget. You have to find funding for it in order for it to become law, essentially, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. They'll have to pass the budget amendment, or there's several amendments that make up the state budget. I want to say there's 4 different amendments. I could be wrong about that, but the budget does have to be passed. We expect that to be done next week, and the legislature only has a limited amount of money that they can appropriate as a body. So, a number of bills that require funding, they may be capable of doing that. Otherwise, we would have to ensure that the governor includes funding for any other legislation that's not covered by the legislative.
So there, James just hit it on the head. This is the behind-the-scenes baseball stuff. This is the anecdotal accounts, the conversation that we're about to have that you probably will never get on your local news type stuff. James
But
just
stuff
said,
you really need to know. Like, really need to know, because it's the difference between something becoming law and it just being an idea that everybody likes, kind of, but not enough to spend any money on it. Huge difference. Huge difference. Monumental. Like, it disappears and doesn't exist anymore if they can't find money for it.
So when James just said you either have to get it funded for in this sort of small pool of money that the legislature has available to it, or you try and talk to the governor's team to get it included in his budget. All right. Now, this is a process that I knew nothing about, James, prior to joining y'all up there. But this happens with a bunch of bills. A bunch of great legislation dies because it can't find the funding. But if you can get the governor's team to sort of sign off on it or include it in his budget, everything's good to go. You don't have to worry about that final end of the legislative process. Here's one of the wrinkles that's developed over the last couple of weeks. It was revealed that Governor Lee has included $13.5 million for a grant for a minor league baseball stadium in Knoxville. All right. And I'm kind of wondering now, if we can find $13.5 million for a minor league baseball stadium, it's a little bit difficult for me to understand why then, James, the governor's team may not be able to find the $384,000 needed for this bill. And this is a similar conversation that happens with a lot of things. Am I wrong? It's not just this bill with the civil asset forfeiture bonds, one of which I believe is protecting constitutional rights. Every single person up there supports this bill, House and Senate. Nobody spoke against this bill. They all love the policy. They think it should have been gone a long time ago.
Right.
But that $384,000 fiscal note is hanging it up. But it's not hanging it up for a baseball stadium. Can you help me make sense a little bit of that, James?
I think it demonstrates, Grant, is where the priorities are. And I can't say it any simpler than that. Certainly, this is a great bill. And we know that often a fiscal note is attached to legislation when they intend for it to die. I don't think that that's the case for this particular bill. I think there is a genuine desire for this legislation to get fully funded. We'll just have to see if that's something that's being considered and will actually be taken care of. So I'm very optimistic.
Let me say it this way, Grant. People who are going to build baseball stadiums lobby a lot better than people who need their stuff back from the criminal justice system. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Maybe they have a little bit of a louder voice. Maybe they can put a little more pressure than people who can't afford the bond, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about lowering the bond so you can get your stuff back, or you don't have to pay a bond that's worth as much as your stuff, because then you lose incentive to even get your stuff back, We
really got David excited today.
Well, it's like you got to put these things in my opinion. Like, I'm listening to it, I'm like, man, if I was watching this, I wouldn't be mad enough about this. And it's like, I want people to be mad, because the idea that someone who's building not even a Major League Baseball stadium, a minor league baseball stadium, where like 1,500 people are going to be the average attendance of that, it's not that big of a deal. Almost $14 million. But we can't find a little bit of money to help people get their stuff back, especially if they're wrongly accused or are proven innocent or innocent by jury, and they still got to pay to get their stuff back. Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. This is one of the reasons why I hope everybody tuning in is following Americans for Prosperity for ways to take action, make your voices heard. We've had petitions all session long going specifically towards this bill. Hey, if you want to reach out, show notes again, click in the link. You'll see Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, wherever you may be watching this later on. An Evernote link in the description section. Scroll down to House Bill 59. You can actually see there. Contact members of the House Finance Ways and Means Committee or the Senate Finance Ways and Means Committee. Ask them to support that bill. On the way out of here, James, because I want to keep this, make sure we're keeping tight on time, getting to the federal stuff, which is really important to me, this court packing thing. Just doing a quick rundown of stuff that passed this last week. House Bill 870, this ensures that victims are paid first, again, on Victims' Rights Week. Victim, if there is criminal restitution ordered, this bill prioritizes making sure the victim is paid first on those restitution payment schedules. It also gives the victim a choice of either converting this restitution order into a civil judgment or going through the criminal restitution order. This is really just making sure, hey, if a crime is committed against an individual, this money is owed to that individual. The victim is paid first before those court costs, litigation fees, fines, anything like that. Both chambers strongly support this. The Senate version of this bill passed out of the Senate Judiciary this week, 9-0. House Bill 870 is scheduled for a regular floor vote on the 26th of this week. Contact your legislator, ask them to support that. And then both of the governors say criminal justice reform packages widely supported here. This is House Bill 784 and 785. You can look in the show notes if you want to see what each one of those does. I may do an entirely separate live stream just devoted to those two because they are chock full of incredible stuff to talk about. But I just wanted to bring those up to let people be aware. Look at the show notes. Good information there as to what they do. Follow. You'll get the newsletter update here on Sunday afternoon as well. But just one more time, those passed in the House 89-1 and 90-1. Now that one no vote, I don't even know who that was. It'd be interesting to look up who that one no vote.
I could tell you. I was there.
Yeah, who was it? Is it
Bruce Griffey?
Oh, was it?
So, yeah, which is why it was so important to point out his support for that earlier legislation that we were discussing, because he certainly had his objections to both of these bills by the governor. He attempted to attach a couple of amendments that would have seriously undermined the legislation.
That's right.
Fortunately, those failed. So it was a good thing. and he had his final say with being the one dissenting vote on both bills.
Hey, Monica said on Facebook, by the way, and there's already a minor league team just down the road. Right, you are, Monica. That's exactly right.
And a perfectly good stadium to go along with it.
Great stadium, man. I love that stadium. All
Man,
right.
we had lunch there on the way to the regional Tennessee championship when we were playing football together in high school. It was a good time. Yeah, man. Oak Ridge, go Wildcats!
Hey, let's move on here, by the way, to the topic du jour, something I've been waiting to get to for a little while. You can tell I'm super psyched about this because it just like it ruffles my feathers up in the same way that David just got ruffled up a second ago. We're going to have a little bit of an inception moment here as we start to talk about the packing the Supreme Court, because I want to show you all an easy way to take action. You're looking at a Facebook inside of a Facebook. It's weird, I know. But if you're seeing this on your screen, yes, we love the likes, hearts, and everything like that. You're seeing this, hit see more, that Evernote link right there. Boom. Takes you into the show notes that we're following along right now. This first one right here, federal issues take action. Stop politicians from packing the Supreme Court. If you click on that very first one, takes you to a very simple letter to sign, tells you what you're signing, asking your legislator in particular. As soon as you hit submit on this information, it goes directly to your House member and senators, telling them this right here. You can click read more to get a little bit more information, to have a fun conversation with your friends about. Fill out the information, hit submit. Easiest way to take action. Now, for those of you that may not know what we're talking about, they're trying to pack the Supreme Court again. And that means exactly what it sounds like.
It's a good thing that you say again, because Grant, is this the first time that this conversation has come up in Congress?
No, man, it's not. And it's not, I doubt it will be the last time either. I mean, it's obviously always for political purposes. And they always try and couch it in something that has nothing to do with political purposes. But the idea here is that because there's a strong, I almost said conservative. I hate it. That's a strong word. I strongly dislike when people say that there's a conservative majority in the Supreme Court. There is not. There is not. There is a textualist or originalist majority in the Supreme Court, as I personally believe it should be. There's a majority of individuals that read the four corners of a document and say, hey, if you want to do something different than what this Constitution explains, run an amendment, pass a bill. That's the reason why you have a legislature. We are not meant to be legislating from the bench. Judicial activism is a major problem, not just at the Supreme Court level, but all the way up through. This is not a conservative majority that's being pushed back against. It's an originalist textualist, which if you hear Justice Scalia talk about this, he's asked all the time, or was back in the day, asked what it means to be one of the last originalists. And his response is, you all realize that term is fairly new. There was no such thing as a textualist or an originalist just a few years ago. We were all just justices. We all saw it this way.
Exactly.
Every single one of us just read the Constitution. We told you what it meant based upon previous cases, and you all figured it out. Under a representative republic, that's what you do. You represent someone to carry to D.C., to legislate on your behalf, pass a bill, convince your fellow man, change society. There are clear mechanisms by which you can do that. 9 unelected old people should not be telling y'all how to change society. That is not their role. You can tell I'm going to rant here a little bit, obviously.
You're doing such a good job, Grant. So good.
Thanks, buddy. If you don't know what's going on, here's the headline from USA Today. Why do Democrats want 13 Supreme Court justices? Their answer doesn't make sense. Democrats introduced a bill last week in the House that would expand the Supreme Court to 13 justices. The bill's co-sponsors would have you believe that they chose this number after a close consideration of the court's history. That 13, this is coming from Representative Hank Johnson out of Georgia. He's a Democrat. Quote, 13 justices would mean 1 justice per circuit court of appeals, consistent with how the number of justices was originally determined. We can actually go on to see that Jerry Nadler said something very similar. I got to laugh a little bit. It's asinine. 9 justices may have made sense in the 19th century when there were only 9 circuits, but the logic behind having only 9 justices is much weaker today when there are 13 circuits. 13 justices for 13 circuits is a sensible progression. Now,
and easy to market.
Yeah, that's right. It's easy to market. In short, since the 1860s, justices have had much less responsibility for the circuits that they oversee. Click the link in the show notes if you want to understand why. Go through the history yourself, but take my word for it. Their duties now pertain primarily, if not exclusively, to emergency requests. Contrary to what Representative Johnson and Nadler would have you believe here, there is not an urgent need or no need at all to add 4 justices to reduce the duties of these regional circuits. And moreover, it's also worth remembering that the 3 justices who currently oversee multiple circuits are Justices John Roberts, Samuel Alito, and Brett Kavanaugh. So I seriously doubt that Democrat lawmakers are eager to implement a reform that would allow these particular justices to better attend their duties at the Supreme Court. If anything, these Democrats would want those conservative justices far more distracted so they're not able to, I don't know, do their version of judicial activism as they see. Do you get what I'm saying? David, James, anything you want to add on before we give a little bit more insight as to what's going on here?
I think the most important thing to note is there have been changes to the number of seats on the Supreme Court. Those all occurred within the first 100 years of this country's founding, and it's fluctuated between 6 and 10 seats, but it has been 9 Supreme Court justices for over 150 years now. There was a sincere threat to court packing back in the early part of the 20th century, but that never materialized. And more importantly, I don't think there's a single justice in recent history that would argue in favor of adding more associate justices to that bench. So, and more importantly, the more activist justices in recent history have argued against it.
And let me say one more time here, too. I don't think anybody has any misconceptions as to what's actually going on here. I'm going to give you an update on the Senate side here in just a second.
Yeah, Grant, that's what I was going to say real quick, if you don't mind. Go
ahead, buddy.
If you don't mind, the part that is annoying to me is, I'm glad that they came up for it with a logical reason, like 13 districts, 13 Supreme Court justices, because that makes it, not incredibly stupid right on its face right out of the gate. So, that's kind of cool. So credit to them for coming up with a way to market this to America without seeming like extremists. But what's annoying about it is it's not good enough for me to get past the idea that they waited until they had the timing of it all. Considering what we went through with Brett Kavanaugh, considering what we went through with Amy Coney Barrett, it's obvious to everyone what's going on. There's a bitterness that they don't have absolute, and by they, I mean the Democratic Party establishment, right? I'm not trying to be too analogous here. The Democratic Party establishment, is super mad that they don't have 100% control over all of federal power. They're like not annoyed by it. They're mad about it. And they can sit here and tell me 13 justices, 13 districts. I don't believe you. I just believe you're a bunch of power-hungry people who want all the power. You have lots and lots and lots of power. You will change the course of American history over the next 4 years by passing certain pieces of legislation. But that's not good enough. You must have absolute power, and that's the quest. The quest is for absolute power, and I don't care what kind of lipstick they put on that pig. But that is something that if Republicans were doing it in this kind of disingenuous way, I would be speaking with this tone and with this tenor and describing it the exact same way. People who are trying to do things with our government, because this is a self-governing system, for just the purposes of having absolute power is something detestable to me. And I can't get past that. I don't care what kind of reasons they come up with. I don't believe you, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I understand your fervor. The idea of circumventing the legislature to enact, say, a particular policy on the American people by way of the court system does an in-run around what we are as a country, this grand experiment that's going on, right? The constitutional republic that we have that should be enshrined with the law, the oldest existing one in the history of the world, the one that modeled every other country is modeled off of, okay? That one. To do an in-run around that because you think you know better can ruffle feathers for sure. Now, look, I'll say this too. Last Thursday, Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, he introduced the bill on the Senate side. And obviously, we're talking increasing from 9 to 13 justices. Now, nearly a week later, this senator has yet to gain a single Senate co-sponsor for this bill. And most of the senators on the Democrat side are wishy-washy at best about this. But I will tell you, it's an interesting opportunity for grandstanding. I think there's some element going on here that, look, man, there are several bills you can run out there and push it to the hills, knowing it's never going to have any chance of passing because you just don't have the support in the Senate to get it through for those 60 votes. You can get a lot of money off it, though. You can get a lot of people to donate to your campaign coffers. You can do a lot of grassroots seating and a whole bunch of other stuff of it. That's kind of the definition of grandstanding. Make a big to-do about something that I realize never has a chance of passing, but it will get you extremely excited, and you might take out your pocketbook for me. Now, of course,
and that benefits both sides.
Yes, right. It really does.
I'll point that out.
It really does. And
so, the attention that it's being given is intentional.
Grant, I was going to say, too, this is how you know it's a blind quest for absolute power, which often is the case when people are going for absolute power, because most people don't want that kind of responsibility. Good people don't want that kind of responsibility because they know it can't be concentrated in a way like that and still be effective and productive. It's a blind chase for power because moderate Democrats, people who actually want to grow the party, see it become something like there's been a big concern after last election that there's a decline in people liking the Democratic Party. People who want to be more moderate, appeal to a broader sense of America, know how much the Amy Coney Barrett and the Kavanaugh fight hurt the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
So this is like a quest for absolute power, willing to like hurt themselves in order to get there. That's crazy. And it shows that those people are not well, in my opinion.
Grayson says in Facebook, I agree with David. Controller two branches of government isn't enough for them. And Yahoo News says the following, by the way. Of course, if congressional Democrats respond to an adverse Supreme Court ruling by packing the court, they would essentially be destroying the court. Once a Democrat Congress increased the number of justices, say from 9 to 13, there would be no reason for Republicans to not add 6 justices next time. They control Congress and the White House. Democrats would then repeat the cycle once they took Congress over, and so on and so forth, until eventually the court's public legitimacy would be completely and utterly shot. Going back yet one more time, this is one thing we love to do back in the radio days and even now, book-ending our conversations. It would decrease the trust in government. What do we start this program with? Passing bills to reinstill trust in government. Don't take my word for it, though, or James or David or Americans for Prosperity. If you don't want to take our word for it, that's fine. Let's listen to Joe Biden tell you his opinion on this very issue. Here's Joe Biden.
President Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put in question, for an entire decade, the independence of the most significant body, including the Congress, in my view, the most significant body in this country, the Supreme Court of the United States of America. The president had the right to do that. He was totally within his power, and his objective was seen clearly.
And it's not just him. One of the figureheads of, say, a liberal movement, Democrat movement, doesn't matter, Supreme Court Justice, late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, said the exact same thing. It puts into question the legitimacy of the independence of that branch of government, which is one more time, I'll end here as we're wrapping up the program here. I'll say again, this is why I don't necessarily take them seriously at their word, but it is something we have to remain diligent and vigilant about. Sign that pledge, send a letter to your legislator, let them know how you feel about this issue in particular, because I'm telling you, the second you sleep on an issue like this is possibly the second when they push in with something else again, right? And I'm just telling y'all right now. Yeah, and right, there's a pinned comment. Thank you, David. There's a pinned comment in the Facebook chat right now where you can actually follow that link right now. You'll see it if you're watching on Facebook. Come over here and check it out on Facebook if you're watching on YouTube. But on the way out here, David, James, anything we missed from the state side, the federal side, anything else you want to touch on before we head out for this week?
I just want to mention that at the end of Thursday's floor session in the House, they went ahead and went into flow motion, which is basically a suspension of the rules within that particular chamber that allows them to be able to move legislation a lot more quickly, rather than wait a prescribed period of time before bills can move from one committee to the next. Those rules significantly change. So things are going to be moving a lot more quickly in the House this coming week. We're also anticipating a session ending as early as the first week of May. So
First week, really?
At least that's what Speaker Sexton said on the floor.
Wow.
So a lot of things are going to happen very quickly.
Yeah,
so a lot of legislation. Yeah, exactly. So a lot of legislation that we've been monitoring, things that are behind the budget, we do anticipate action to be taken in the next 2 weeks.
And David, anything else on the way out that you wanted to make mention of?
Well, I wanted to say if all that means the next couple episodes of this will be jam-packed of very relevant information. So make sure you tune in either live with us next Thursday at 6 Central, 7 Eastern, around that time. We kind of do it when we get done with work, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's around that time, or you can watch it back later. So make sure you check that out, because there's going to be more information in the next 2 weeks than probably the previous 4, because that thing he talked about, flow motion, that means like they're passing stuff left and right. Everything that's kind of been backlogged to get shoved through so everybody can go home because we have a part-time legislature. Also, I wanted to highlight...
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. I just wanted to say there's context there. I also wanted to highlight a new service that AFP Tennessee is offering. If you like the show notes... If you love the show notes, we have something for you. Grant is putting out a newsletter that's a legislative update and other great information that AFP Tennessee is involved in. And I think, Grant, probably the best way for folks to sign up for that at the moment, and we're trying to figure out a way to streamline it a little bit, is to maybe give out your email.
Yeah, that works. Yeah. ghenry@afphq.org. That's ghenry@afphq.org. All you got to do is literally, if you just shoot me your email only, I'll know what you're referencing. Just send me or just say, hey, add me to the list, and I'll just grab your email from there or something like that, and we'll send you a newsletter. It has links to this video. It has links to all this stuff, to ways to take action, the federal issues, all these breakdowns of the state bills that are moving, the basic summary of the bills, the history of them, what's coming up next. All that stuff is just a nice, neat little condensed format. Looks good on smartphones and desktop. Send me your email. I'll get that out to your people as well. But yeah, I think that's great. Also, I know we might be ending state legislature in about 2 weeks, but just around the corner is a summer just jam-packed. I mean, my schedule, David's schedule, Mickey's schedule is already just like filling up with grassroots trainings that we're going to be making available, some one-off events that we're doing all over the place, taking the culture back type stuff. Incredible things coming over the summer, so stay tuned for that. We'll keep doing these updates even when the legislature's out. On the way out for today, though, to each and every one of y'all, we love y'all sincerely. Reach out to us personally if you got any questions, if you want any follow-up, if you want to get involved, if you just want to, like, hey, have a chat, be friendly, whatever you want to do. James is there. I'm there. David's there for you. We will see y'all next time. Goodbye.